Live and so please connect with us in those two venues if you want to, and in the studio with us, trekking all the way through Spanish Fork Canyon from Price, Utah, is Pastor Steve Swinburne of Price Chapel. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, great to be here this morning, Heather. It was a beautiful drive. The weather was really nice today, which is good because Monday morning we had like 4 inches of snow in Price, and it was not great. So I was happy that all worked out well.
You're so nice. It's just not great.
Yeah.
Might be good. We don't want to be complainers or anything, but that's good. That's good. Today is Stop Bad Service Day today, and I'm just thinking, how does one stop bad service? Like if you were experiencing, do you just hold up your hand and say, just stop right there?
Let me stop you right there.
I don't exactly know how that
This
goes.
is some bad service, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we are intervention. I don't know. Maybe what does that mean?
I don't know.
I live in a small town, so I don't have the luxury to complain when I receive bad service. It's just like,
Gladys,
I can't
are you
do it.
having a bad day? Oh man, actually, that's a good point too. We come from a small town, and sometimes you know these people. They're your peeps. They're your peeps, and sometimes you're like, oh boy, something's happening here, and you don't want to be that person to complain because you know that you're going to see them in church the next day, and you're like, okay. But usually you just stand up, give them a hug, and then because you can do that in a small town, right? Maybe
Yeah.
not in Price. Maybe Price is more like, hey, stay away, keep your space.
Renee and I went out to dinner Saturday night, though. We did a date night, and we actually had like the best server we've had in a long time. Like, she was fantastic. And we told her then, they're like, you're like the best server in Price that we've had like in a long time. So
Wow.
it's nice when you get good service to let them know and make their day. You know.
See, I think so.
Leave them a big tip.
Which and you know, Yelp reviews I found. I mean, I don't like to like say Yelp is all that, but like I've we only review places when we're angry, and maybe I've seen some of those, and you're like, oh, somebody really does not like that server. So maybe we just need to go the extra mile and be a little more vocal about things that we enjoy. Just thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, I'm probably more likely to leave a review when
I'm angry.
Yeah, I was up here. We call it going up north. We're coming up here from Price, and we went to Slim Chickens, which I've never been to Slim Chickens.
Me either. Yeah, I went there.
And my food took 40 minutes
What?
to come out, and it was a disaster. And so I left a review, and the title was Slow Chickens. But the food was good when I got it.
Can I just say though, friend,
took
we are
forever.
not dissing any company, nor are we promoting any company.
No.
This is one of these places that we just love, and that they probably just had a bad day. And plus, they're kind of new, and you know,
Yeah.
that's right.
It seemed
You're
like
gonna
a
get us in
staffing
trouble.
issue.
You're getting us in trouble. Oh, let me
But
tell you.
Slim Chickens, if you want to be a sponsor of Key Radio, please reach out to us, and I will take down my Yelp review.
Yeah,
I actually think it's a Google review.
I'm in trouble. Mike's gonna yell at me. Oh, today is also Discover What Your Name Means Day. What's your name mean, Pastor Steve?
Crowned one or anointed one?
Oh, mine means flowering shrubbery in Ireland. I don't know. What does Benjamin mean?
Oh, Benjamin means son of my right hand.
Ah,
And Grant is just like I don't know. It's like the Highland of Scotland. There was a
I
clan.
learned lots about you today.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd purposely call
So
you
can
Grant.
we call you Benji?
No.
That would not be preferable. No.
But Smudge is one. Can we use
Yeah.
that one? Smudge.
That's a
That's
story for
legit.
another time.
Okay. But you could if you,
You
wanted to. What's going on? Let's stop this. What is going on at Price Chapel? I know you guys have like you're ramping things up because the Resurrection Sunday is fast approaching. What are you doing?
Yeah, we're just excited for Holy Week. We'll Palm Sunday. We'll start off Holy Week. I'm going to do a sermon called "The Procession of the Lambs," and then we'll do a Maundy Thursday service, which we've never done before, which is really centered upon the stories of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples and the Last Supper with the disciples. So we'll do a Maundy Thursday service, and then on Good Friday we'll have a prayer experience set up in the church that anyone can come from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and do in our sanctuary. It'll be a self-guided experience, and then Easter Sunday we'll do our 2 services like normal, but we'll have a big breakfast that people can hit after first service or before second service. So
Fantastic.
that's
So,
the
friend, I
plan.
mean, really think about this. Leading up to this is the pinnacle of the Christian faith is our risen Lord, and so all of these things preparing your heart to celebrate and praise and worship our God. I mean, it's good to remember these things. It's always good to remember to practice the gospel, and I just love when we're able to do that, especially commemorating the resurrection. Also, too, congratulations are in order, because you've celebrated a milestone in your personal ministry.
Yeah, we had a big celebration, or they did a celebration for us at church on Sunday, celebrating 10 years at Price Chapel. So I really felt really blessed, and our hearts were just full as they put on a celebration for us and luncheon and shared videos and memories. So
So
we
they
just
like
love our
you.
church family.
That's what's so
I guess
fun.
so. I guess
they
they
did
wanna keep
all
us
this
around.
stuff, and they're like, yeah. I mean, what if it was 10 years and they're like,
to
well,
go.
here's a cupcake.
Yeah.
When are you leaving?
Mhm.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And thank you for your faithful service for this decade. That's fantastic.
Yeah, my whole 30s. I came when I was 30, and now I'm 40. So there we go.
Oh, time sure
I have a
flies.
little bit more gray in my beard than I did a lot more gray than I did when I came. I had
But that's
already
not
lost my
because of-
hair at my previous church. They took my hair, and Christ Chapel's giving me gray. So
See, I've always
go.
blamed my kids, but now I'm going to think about it. Maybe it's key rating.
yeah,
no,
pastors, we
joking.
just blame churches. For
That's
that.
all right.
No.
Stop doing that. They're going to take back their whatever they gave you. So, okay. Shall we get
Or it's just the normal aging process. I don't know.
All right, let's get us started here. We are in the book of Judges, and I think it's really funny that you asked us the question coming in. Why did you choose the book of Judges?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was curious.
So, and I wish I could tell you, well, Grant and I, we fasted and prayed about this for many a month, and we decided that the Lord was leading us to do this. But this is not exactly what happened, Grant, right?
No, we waited for the last minute, and then we, like the day of, we threw out these ideas. Well, it was the day before. We were like, well, we could do this one or that one. It's like, or we could do this one. Yeah, I was thinking about that one too. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it goes.
I'm here for it. I'm excited because we get to do the story of Ehud today.
Yeah.
which is a gross story. And I almost preached it. I filled in at our youth group a couple months ago because Pastor Alex was out of town. And I went and did a gross that night with him. I used to do youth ministry and loved doing a gross that night every year. And so I was like, oh, should I do like a gross Bible story as like the devotional message that night? So I almost did Ehud. And I was like,
You did Herod instead of the worms, didn't you?
No,
Oh.
I did eat a worm. I ate
Oh.
a live earthworm at gross that night. So that was something.
You're just saying all the things today.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Sick.
And I have two kids in youth group, so that it was fun. They had to do a competition. They actually were both doing this competition where they had to peel a banana with their bare feet and then
Ew.
eat the banana.
Oh.
It was a race. My son won.
I have so many questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. Maybe later. Yeah, so we're looking forward to this. Let's just talk about the Book of Judges again. For those of us who are just kind of walked in on this conversation, the Book of Judges is in the Old Testament, and that is actually one of the reasons why Grant and I decided to go through Judges is because we had been kind of concentrating on New Testament stuff. But when we were talking, especially in the Book of Hebrews, you're like, man, there's just so many allusions to, or so many references back to Genesis and really just the Old Testament. And so we thought, well, let's just kind of go to an Old Testament book too. And what we're going to realize is that we do see pictures of Christ throughout all the Old Testament, leading up to finally for Christ to come, right? Emmanuel, God with us. But we wanted to go through Judges then because this is also one of those books where you, like right in the get-go, it's like the people, we're going to be looking at Othniel today and Ehud and Shamgar as well. And it says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord, their God, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreth. And so right away you're looking like, wow, they forgot God. And that's really what we're seeing in our society today. But so in one respect, it's not new. This happens all the time in humanity, throughout all of history. But also, there's great warning here, and so we want to make sure that we are looking at God's word, and we want to see the character of God and seeing how He dealt with His people who had forgotten Him. So there's just a number of layers of why we chose Judges. Now, Judges is at a different time period. It's you got Genesis, which we have so much. There's so much territory and history to cover in there. And what we're going to find through Judges is that a lot of what they're struggling with were things that happened all the way back in Genesis, which I think is kind of tremendous. But what can you tell us, Pastor Steve, about this whole book of Judges and what is going on? What's the purpose of the book of Judges?
Yeah, so few important things to know is just the time period Judges covers. So we're starting at the end of Joshua's ministry. Joshua's finished leading Israel. Joshua succeeded Moses. Joshua is the one that brings Israel into the Promised Land. And then the history of Judges then goes from Joshua to the rise of monarchy in Israel with King Saul and then King David. And so we have this period, I think it's about 400 years or so, of these judges. When you hear the word judge and these leaders as judges, we're thinking like a judge in a courtroom. They're not judges in that sense at all. They're really military leaders, and they're often described throughout the book as deliverers. And so I need to think about them in that type of aspect. There's 6 major judges in the book of Judges, and so we'll look at 2 of them today, Othniel, Ehud, and there's Deborah and Gideon and Jephthah, and then Samson. So there's the 6 major judges. And really the book is this whole cycle that just repeats itself, and there's a literary structure that just shows us this repetition that again and again there's this rebellion, and then there's an oppression by a country around them, people around them oppress them, and then eventually they cry out for deliverance. Sometimes they repent as they cry out for deliverance, and then God raises up a deliverer, and they do well for a while, and they repeat the cycle. And so it can be a frustrating book to read because you just see this cycle repeated. It's similar to when you read 1 Kings and 2 Kings, and you see the same cycle repeated with the kings of Israel as well.
Mm-hmm. That is just always harkens like there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just this is just humanity, and when you try to work outside the parameters, the boundaries, the guardrails, if you will, of the Lord, things happen, and it's not good. It's not good, and for a reason, especially with the Jewish people, because as we remember, it is through Israel that the Christ comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these people are truly set apart for really the salvation of the world, right? I mean, and this is hearkening back to the Abrahamic covenant where God said, I'm going to give you, you're going to be a great nation. You're going to be my people. You are going to bless the nations, right? And so we're seeing how even in spite of their sin and their betrayal and their covetousness and so on and so forth and their sin, despite all that, God comes through on His promises, which praise the Lord for His character, right? Okay, and then I guess the other thing too is, who do you think wrote the book of Judges?
Well, we don't know who wrote the book of Judges. We're not introduced to the author. And so there's different theories out there. From my research, I think the one that makes most sense to me, if you read the book from a literary and a political perspective and really look at some of the political lenses it's interpreted through, I think it's probably at least compiled and edited when they're in the Babylonian exile, and so as late as 6th century BCE. And one of the reasons I think that makes sense is here Israel is in exile, and they're reflecting on how do we end up here? And, well, they look back in their history. Well, it's the same thing that happened in Judges time and time again. We're oppressed by other nations, but then God would raise up a deliverer. And so they have this messianic hope that begins, in this time in the exile of God's going to raise up another deliverer, the Messiah, the anointed one to come and deliver us. And you see Israel really struggle with that because they're looking for the same type of deliverer that they had in the book of Judges. They're looking for a military leader. They put their hope in people like Judas of Maccabees, the hammer, to vanquish their enemies and liberate them politically. But then Jesus comes and they don't recognize him because they're looking for a leader like the Judges, and Jesus is coming not to liberate them in a military sense, but to liberate them in a cosmic one.
Wow. God's ways are higher than
Yeah.
our ways, right? And I think that that's a big takeaway there. Thank you for that. I've heard other things, so I'm learning something new every day, and that's why we're having these conversations, friend. Right? If we were talking about stuff we already know, then what's the point, right? But it's just really good to dig in and to get a little bit more perspective.
Yeah, I just want to take like that rabbit hole for a second there, where you mentioned that Jesus came to liberate us in a cosmic sense. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So if you're Israel, you're just thinking we want our kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, to be liberated from oppression of the other kingdoms around. And when Jesus comes, he's asked, by Pilate and others, are you the king? Are you the king of the Jews? And he says, well, yeah, I am the king, but my kingdom's not of this world. And so he's coming to rescue us from the kingdom of darkness, which infiltrates and oversees and infects the whole entire world, and translate into his kingdom of light, the kingdom of God. And so that's much greater than just focusing on one nation or one people group even, that Jesus has come to usher us into his kingdom as his sons and daughters.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, friend, as you remember, Judges kind of takes place after the death of Joshua, and really the meat and potatoes of it is after the death of all the elders during Joshua's time. The elders who had outlived Joshua. We learned that in chapter 2, around verse 6 or so. And so we're seeing that Joshua was a very godly leader. And did he make mistakes? Yeah, he did. And you can read that in the book of Joshua if you want to. But the point is, he was a very godly leader. The elders, of course, also, I'm assuming very godly people, because all this weird stuff starts happening after this generation. And the next generation, they forget God. They forget everything that God did, even though God had instituted things like the Passover and a lot of these different festivals. They just chose to forget God. Do you have any comment on that before?
Yeah, Joshua really knew the presence of the Lord. And some of the stories I love are, the cloud of God's presence would come and settle over this tent that Moses would hang out in. And it even says Moses would speak to God face to face as a man speaks with a friend. But then Moses would leave the tent and Joshua would just hang out there. And he just hung out in God's presence. And there was that closeness of relationship. And so Joshua and that whole generation had an experience of knowing God's presence, of knowing God's miraculous work, of knowing his deliverance, of seeing him being trustworthy. And we see as we go through Judges that there's subsequent generations that didn't have that same experience or didn't seek it out. And so they, what's to make our God Yahweh different than any of these other gods?
So now we're getting to this point where the Lord raises up judges, and I'm looking just as a review on Judges chapter 2:16. The Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet, 17, yet they did not listen to their judges, and so on and so forth. And so the Lord, that's where you're getting this cycle. But now there's a lot of nations also that are on the scene. And if you remember from yesterday, we discussed that God had told them that they were supposed to vanquish their enemies. They were supposed to take over the land. But what they ended up doing, instead of vanquishing their enemies, they decided that they were just going to keep them in forced labor. Well, there's a problem with that. Number one, God was exacting judgment on these very wicked nations, okay, for number one. And God decided and chose to use the Israelites to do so. And they disobeyed God in that manner. So there's that sticking point. There's another reason, I think, that why God wanted them to vanquish their enemies. And that was because these people and their wicked ways, it really did... It really did bring up the sinfulness of the Israelites, and they became really interested and enamored with the so-called gods of their enemies. And this is a bad thing, because if you remember, we have, let's just go 10 commandments here. Verse 2, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. Love the Lord, and there is no other God, and don't make idols. So what do? They decide that they're going to disregard God, and they're going to the idols. Didn't they learn anything?
Yeah, it makes me think of a decision I had to make in about 4th or 5th grade. I had some friends that were just bad influences, and they swore a lot, and they just weren't great influences on me. And I actually had to make a conscious decision, especially with one of these friends who was a neighbor, that it wasn't going to be good for me. I was going to become who I needed to become and be like Jesus wanted me to be if I continued to be friends with him, that I had to not be friends with him anymore. And so I remember actually making that decision as like a 10-year-old or 11-year-old
Wow.
to do so. And this is kind of what's going on here. It's like if these people are living next door to you, they're going to influence you. That's why it's so important, who our friends are. And as I have kids now in middle school, it's really important to me that they have good friends and because that's going to influence you. And so that's for Israel. That's a big deal. And they are living in a society full of polytheism, where people worship multiple gods and many gods, and they have a god for everything, kind of like Hinduism today, in a way. And so they struggle to be a monotheistic faith of believing there's only one God. And God's just trying to get them, I think, first in the story to really realize that he is greater than all other gods. And then, you got to leave all these other gods behind and just only worship me.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is monotheism was a strange concept, and it made them a strange people. They were strangers in a strange land, and surrounding them are all these people that believe in polytheism. And an easy way to get in with these people is to accept their gods as equal to your own and to say, yeah, I can still have my God. I can still have my religion, but I can also have yours too. And that's not a foreign concept to us today, where we have these philosophies of the people around us who are of the non-believers and the believers. So with Christians and non-Christians, there are so many different philosophies and theologies. And I see this movement in Christianity to accept all these other philosophies and theologies and to just kind of blend them all together and say, it's all real, it's all true. But the Bible makes some very specific claims about who God is and how we are to approach him, how we are to worship him, how we are to have relationship with him. And it goes against the broader philosophies and theologies of those around us. And so there is this stand that has to be taken that we need to stand firm on the Bible and what it says. And that's what the Israelites didn't do here in Judges, but instead they kind of blended their monotheism with the polytheism of those around them.
Yeah, the temptation today is to customize our spirituality in the same way we customize our coffee.
Right.
We have endless choices and whatever little things we want to put in, we can put in.
Can I get soy milk with that?
But more choices for milk than ever before, don't we?
Yeah. I just
I don't
even
even know
wonder
you
if
could
it's
get
coffee
milk
anymore.
from a
Yeah.
nut until a
Right.
few years ago. Didn't even know how you do that.
Oh my. So here we are. All of these crazy things happening. The people of Israel are just, you know what? They're embracing these other gods, which are no gods at all, right? It's becoming quite demonic. The things that these other nations are doing it flies in the face of the character of God. This is absolute. It's not just blasphemy, but this is treason, right? I mean, this is disloyalty to the God who has delivered them out of Egypt. How quickly we forget. Well, guess what? The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. Therefore,
Chapter 3, verse 7, if you're following along.
yes,
of
thank you.
Judges. Yeah.
Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. How did I do on that? How sound good?
That's good.
Yeah, it's messing around. I don't know what I'm doing.
You say it fast and you say it confidently.
That's
and
right.
No one questions.
Yeah, I guess I. And the people of Israel served Cushan Rishathaim 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Walk us through this.
Yeah, and so we see the first judge. We're just introduced to him, and he's going to be kind of a model judge, even though we don't know a ton about him. But Israel's done evil, so they're oppressed by their enemies. So we're seeing the first cycle here in the book of Judges, and the people begin to cry out for a deliver. And it's interesting, this Othniel, because we're told he's got a family tie here back to Caleb. And remember Caleb and Joshua, who were hand in hand in leading Israel, and they were the ones who had courage and faith when Moses sent out the original spies when they went to the land. They said, no, we should go, and the people decided, no, we shouldn't go. And so he's got, I believe Caleb was his uncle, so that's kind of cool. Don't know what Caleb might have taught him and what he would have learned from his uncle, but probably something. And you see here, it says here that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him in verse 10. And so he's really becomes this model of, we'll see with future judges, that they're raised up and they deliver Israel and they do some military battle, but not every one of them. Ehud's an example we'll get to. It doesn't say the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. And so God has anointed Othniel. The Spirit of the Lord is upon him for this moment to deliver Israel from their enemies.
I love this because then it says, after all of this, raised up a deliverer, Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. He went to war, and the Lord gave Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand. And I think that's really important because this has really been the trajectory of the Israelites the whole time. They weren't a model military force. They were a bunch of former slaves, right? And so therefore they were not afforded the training that most militaries have, right?
Yeah.
But the Lord has always gone before them and to fight the battles for them. And I think this is just a beautiful, again, a reminder of what the Lord has done for his people when he covenanted with them. I guess also, too, I just wanted to point out, and I think you were just alluding to it, it's Othniel was the nephew of Caleb. And I think sometimes we forget the importance of family legacy, training your family, maybe living. Caleb was such a man of faith. I mean, he really was. And when all the other, that whole generation just perished out in the desert, except for Joshua and except for Caleb, like, think about this. Not even Moses, Miriam, or Aaron were able to go into the promised land. That's really striking. And here's Caleb. And he goes in there and he says, listen, the Lord promised me this land. And he had the faith enough to say, God promised me this. I'm claiming what God has promised me. So a man of faith, just an incredible man of faith. And so Othniel, the nephew here, I think he saw that. And I think that, I think he followed suit. I really do. I mean, you don't know a lot about him.
Yeah.
But I think that's not unreasonable to gather.
Imagine their family sitting around a campfire and Caleb sharing those stories with Othniel, and maybe Othniel's just young at that time, but he's listening and he's hearing and he's remembering. In my family, I'm blessed to be from a family where there's a legacy of seeing God at work. And so we have these stories in our families of miracles God's done and times God's healed people and just things we can't explain without him. And so learning those stories as a young kid and those stuck with me. And this God is real. I can point to it. I mean, look at what he did in my grandpa's life, my great-grandpa's life. And so Othniel had that.
And let me just aside again, friend, if you don't have that legacy, let's say you are the first Christ follower in your family, start that legacy, right? Then you get to start it.
Yep,
Yay!
absolutely.
How cool is that? And just be very faithful to the Lord. And anyway, I don't want to get too aside, but I do want to see here that the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Okay, so we're seeing Othniel. Is there anything else that we can glean from the judge Othniel here?
Just that, 40 years of peace, that's pretty good. Of rest in the land. That word rest means like happiness, peace, well-being. So that doesn't mean they were not having any war battles in those time, but there's peace in the land. And I love that he uses the word land there, that God actually cares about the land. This is a special land that he wants Israel to have. And he actually wants the land to be at peace. I was reading Leviticus the other day, Leviticus 25 and part of 26 lays out this beautiful vision of what life would look like for Israel if they obey God's way. And in it, he lays out a plan for Sabbath and even for giving the fields a Sabbath. The fields rest every 7 years, the year of Jubilee every 49 years, and just the beauty of what they could experience. But then it transitions in the middle of chapter 26 of Leviticus to, but if you don't obey, and if you don't go with my plan for your flourishing, this is what will happen. And then that's what we see in Judges. They don't go along with God's plan for flourishing, and it's exactly what God said would happen in Leviticus 26. But they're always welcome to to turn and go back. And so for 40 years, they kind of turn and go back. But then Othniel dies and they go back to their ways. And this is how important leadership is.
Yes.
That often when there are not good godly leaders, that people stray away, and that God uses men and women, uses women, Deborah and Judges, to help lead people and help keep them obedient to Him and His Word, and that's so important. And so we need those good leaders today that know the Lord and love Him, and then encourage us to follow in His ways.
That's so good. So here we are, 40 years of rest. That sounds beautiful. But then we get to verse 12. It didn't go very far. And then the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. When God repeats himself, it's not because he's just waxing eloquent here. You have to understand the reason why they're suffering is because they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And again, before we get too caught up in, oh, I can't believe God is so mean, do you remember how good God is? Do you remember what he's done for his people? Do you remember the Garden of Eden, how gorgeous it was? Do you remember that, when you are walking with the Lord, the fruit of walking with the Lord is having this joy, having peace, having patience with one another. You have good relationships with one another. You have a strong relationship with the Lord. All these things are good. And remember, God said, if you do, I'm so glad you mentioned this. If you do what God has told you, you're going to have this wonderful, peaceful, non-dramatic life. But if you do what's evil in the sight of the Lord, there's going to be, of course, spiritual consequences, but natural consequences. Like if I'm going to be selfish, guess what? I'm going to have anxiety. I'm going to have adversity with my neighbors and my family members. So this just does make sense. So here we go. They did evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay. He gathered himself the Ammonites. This is again Eglon, the king of Moab, gathered himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites and went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. And the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. Okay. There's a lot of names here and a lot of nations. Okay. At least we get three here. We get Moab, we get the Ammonites, and we get the Amalekites. And I want to just hover here because it's kind of significant who these people are, right? So, who's Moab?
So Moab is they're neighbors of them, but they also are in a way relatives of them. They're not that far apart, and you actually see God use a Moabite and Ruth later on, and just after Judges, and so these people are there's related to them, but they've gone down another path. They haven't stayed in that same family line.
Right. So I'm looking at, if you go again back to Genesis and we go back to Abraham, remember Abraham had a nephew named Lot, and they were supposed to go to a land, actually Canaan, which is kind of funny. But Lot had, these are Lot's sons, if you will. Okay. So we had Ben Amni and we had Moab. Those are children that Lot had with both of his daughters, which is
not great.
Not great. But so here we have Moab. Okay. This is Abraham's. These are Lot's descendants, so these are like family, and the Ammonites, which are again basically shirt-tail relation, if you will. But then we have the Amalekites, and those are sons basically of Esau. They're different. Esau has different, and so these are family people. I just find that very striking.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Distant cousin is really messed up.
Yeah. So there's not a good family reunion here. So they took possession, and the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. And then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. Oh, we forget about the Lord, and then we come into trouble. Now we're going to cry out to the Lord again. We're going to see this pattern all the time. And then the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. All this is important. Okay. Should I keep reading?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. The people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab, and Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. And he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man. I just
Jabba the Hutt. Picture Jabba the Hutt.
okay. And this is one you were entertaining for the gross
Yeah,
out night.
yeah.
I love it. Okay.
It gets grosser.
Okay. And when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute, but he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded, silence! And all his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached with his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into Eglon's belly. And the hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. This is such a gross thing.
Nice way for the translators to put it.
Uh-huh. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. And when he had gone, the servants came. And when they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, surely he is relieving himself in the closet of the cool chamber. Come on, this is real life stuff here. And they waited till they were embarrassed. He was like, woo. But when he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber, they took the key, opened them, and there lay their lord dead on the floor. Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Seirah. Okay, let's just kind of stop there. Lots going on here. Did we read? Did we really read what we read? Like, so explain the situation.
Yeah, it's quite the story. So God raised up Ehud, and he's a left-handed man, which is interesting. You know, left-handed people weren't super common, and still are a minority today. I have a left-handed daughter, and it's hard living in a right-handed world as a
Yes.
left-handed person. But it gives him an advantage in this situation, and he really has to come up with this whole scheme. Okay, well, how are we going to conquer the Moabites? How do we get rid of Eglon? And, how do we get our freedom? And it's almost like an Ocean's 11 type planning that has to go on here. And so he is able to figure out, well, I'm left-handed, which means I would keep my dagger, my sword on my right thigh. So if I'm coming in to visit the king, they might search me for a weapon, but they're probably going to search my left thigh, my left side, because that's where you keep it if you're right-handed. So he has a tactical advantage there. So he thinks, well, I think I can get away with this. And he's been designated to bring a tribute to the king. So the king's excited because Ehud's going to bring him a tribute, bring him something valuable. But then Ehud had decided, you know what, I'll really bait him in and tell him I have a message. And what the king probably would have thought is that Ehud has a message from his God, from Yahweh, for him. And he'd be totally open to that. Yeah, sure. More messages from more gods, the better. I'd be happy to hear an omen, a prophecy, a message from your God. And so he's excited about that and welcomes Ehud in, so it's working for Ehud, and they get in the chamber, and then Ehud's leaning over. I'm gonna give you the message, and he's able to just pull out that dagger and get it in the king's stomach there in his belly, and it's probably an 18-inch dagger, and it's double-sided, so it's big, but that's not huge, and it just sinks in. So this is a big guy.
Yeah.
And then it must hit his sphincter, and his just releases all of his waste, all of his poop comes out. So quite a nasty situation there. And then so Ehud's plot's working pretty well, and then he's got to figure out, well, how do I escape?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we don't have all the details, so we have to imagine a little bit. But we're told he locks the doors there, so he locks the doors, and then he escapes. Then NIV says, I think ESV does too, he went out into the porch.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow he gets out, whether there was a back door or a back window he could get off. Some people think he might have escaped through the toilet shaft, actually removed the toilet seat, descended through the floor into the latrine below, and then went out through the janitor door out to porch. Could have gone out that way. Could have gotten even grosser. So, but he couldn't just go out the way he came in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they're just waiting outside his attendants, Eglon's attendants, and they're like, why is he taking so long? Well, he's probably just relieving himself. He's probably just, it's a
Well,
longer one. He's got
The
a news.
door is locked.
Yeah.
And we can smell something.
Yeah, he's got the Moab Daily News in there, and he's just taking his time.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that what the newspaper's called, Moab now? I'm not sure. But anyway, and so finally they come in and find him dead, and then so quite a plot, or quite a plan by Ehud, who's a smart guy. He's pretty brave to do
Oh,
that,
yeah.
because if he gets caught any time along the way, things are not going to go well for him. So a pretty amazing story, and I love that the Bible doesn't like gloss over the stuff. It includes the gross stuff, the weird stuff, the foul stuff sometimes even, and that just to me lends to its validity.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think we can look back, too, and say, all right, what was really the demise of this king? Of course, I just see the Lord there's a judgment. But also, too, like the pridefulness of the king, right? Like he put himself in a really bad situation. Why would you ever lock yourself basically in a room with who should be your enemy? Because you're oppressing his people. And yes, they're bringing in paying tribute, but don't you have to be suspicious about what's going on? But here, I don't know, maybe Ehud just had this pretty convincing charisma about himself, and like falling all over himself and flattering the king beyond almost embarrassing. Who knows? But listen, I've got a secret message for you. How many of us love a good secret? And if you're going to bring me into your confidence, how cool is that? I am the one who's got the power then, right? And so I find that really, like, I think the heart of the king, the foolishness, it was the foolishness that probably led to his demise as well. Just incredible things. The left-handedness, a lot of people would say too, like that could have, because they said it's left-handed, he's a Benjamite. Some people even say, a lot of, like, usually that could be like a character trait of the Benjamites. I don't know. It's a nice thought. I don't know if we need to go there. I just think it's very fascinating, though. But maybe just to say this, if you're a left-handed person, you know what? People underestimate you, maybe.
God can still use you, even if you're left-handed.
That's great. So he escapes while they're delayed, and he passes beyond the idols and escaped to Sarah. And I just love that detail even too, because I bet you any money, if we go over to, let's say, that site, we'd be able to see like, wow, there's where he was passing through. I mean, that just lets again to the credibility which you were talking about. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. Then the people of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, "Follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and did not allow anyone to pass over. And then it says they killed at that time about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. Not a man escaped. A lot of times you'll see numbers just kind of like thrown out there. 10,000 people, that's a lot of people.
That's more than the whole population of Price.
Just to give you an idea. I mean, that's a devastating blow. Wow. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. That's a lot of years. So that's twice as many years as Othniel time. So pretty impressive there. Wow. I wanted to point out too, because a lot of times we see these events that are happening, and we read our Bible as though it's chronological. And what I think is really interesting is that the book of Ruth was written during the Judges time frame. Okay. And so the book of Ruth, you have Othniel, and then basically it's Ruth moves back to Bethlehem. So in between Othniel and Ehud, that's the time when the whole stuff of Ruth was happening, where Naomi and her husband and her two boys moved to Moab. Where, like, do you see this? And then her sons die. Naomi's sons die, and she's left with these two daughters-in-law. Her husband's also passed away. So we Grant, you and I were kind of talking like it would be cool to, like, because sometime in between where Eglon was killed, the king of the Moabites, that's about the same time period that Naomi and Ruth moved back to Bethlehem. So it's just interesting. Like all these things we think are all separated and sanitized, but they're not. Life was happening generally for all the people. There you have these battles, but there's also weird life things going on too. And it's in between those time periods that Ruth, the Moabitess, is moved back to Bethlehem, marries Boaz, who is in the line of Judah, and she ends up becoming the great-great-great-great-grandma, basically, of Jesus. So, what?
Yeah, and just this whole thing, this parallel here, because with Ruth, the big decision that she made was, your God will be my God. And here's Ehud, and he's passing by these idols that were powerless to stop this assassin from killing this king. And what was the big sin of Israel that led to this? But adopting the idols, the false gods of the nations around them. And it just shows how God is God alone, and how the gods that the Israelites were adopting, that they were putting their faith, they were hedging their bets theologically. They were spreading out their faith, their belief. They were putting some trust and faith in these false gods to save them. And yet it's their God, the one true God, who it shows that he is greater, that he has the power over anything else. So yeah, it's just an interesting picture there of him passing by these idols that were powerless to stop him. Yeah.
That is... Grant, you have such great insight. I really thank you for that. This is a fascinating thing, too, because here is Ehud, and like you said, he's going past these idols that were supposed to be so powerful. Ehud was a Benjamite, a left-handed Benjamite. I mean, there's nothing significant and wonderful about this man. So a mere left-handed Benjamite defeated basically all these idols as he's passing. Well, it's only the Lord. Only the Lord. That's so fascinating. And interesting, too, just to give us some, because this is not something that's just on a different planet somewhere in the galaxy. This is this took place on our planet in the Middle East. And Moab...
It's not by Arches National Park?
No, that's the wrong Moab.
Okay,
yeah.
wrong Moab.
I've always been kind of wondering why they named it Moab, because Moab's not a good thing. But that's another aside for another day. But Moab is present-day Jordan. Yes, present-day Jordan. So I find that very interesting, too. So just a lot of animosity, and this has been going on for millennia. So just incredible stuff.
Yeah, the tension you see in the news today is the same. Some of the same tension's been around for a long, long time.
Yes, which is fascinating. And then just because we can, we're going to just hit Shamgar real quick, if that's okay. And this guy has, in my Bible, 4 lines, not even a full 4 lines here. After him, again, talking about Ehud and the fact that the land had rest for 80 years, Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. So and then there's Shamgar. Now, I always get caught up on weird words. Ox goad.
Yeah.
Can we say cattle prod? Would that be the same thing?
Yeah, probably a cattle prod, cattle guide with a metal point at the end. So basically, it'd be like a short spear for them. And you see Israel; they don't have sophisticated military technology, so they're working with what they got. Ehud's got a little dagger. Shamgar's got this, this ox goad. David will have a sling, and so God delivers them through what they have, and they don't have to have the best military technology.
Right. So, yeah, there's kind of this idea when we think about warfare is that these are everyone is best outfitted. It's we think about the Bronze Age and the technology they had, and it's okay, this is everyone had the same uniform. We think of they had this kind of plate, what am I thinking of? It's the tunic. Yeah. They might have had a breastplate, and they have the short swords, and they have the spears, and it's we think of everyone having the same
everybody's
equipment.
Roman, right?
Everyone has the shield. Everyone has the spear. But instead, we see peasant warfare, where it's over Shamgar's military career. He's I took down 600 Philistines, and my only weapon was my ox goad, because that's what he had.
It's like, get along, Bessie. Oh, there's a Philistine.
And that's just kind of, a reality that we don't really think about. We take our own, like, it's like, yeah, I saw Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston, and it's like, that's what's in our minds. It's like, oh, yeah, everyone is like, it's this military, and they're all very, like, here's your standard issue weapons. And it's like, no, that's not what we're seeing here.
Yeah, that's so good. Again, it's not the military prowess of Israel, right? It's not that it's all the Lord, and if you think it's you, did you see the ox goad? That's what they use, and I think that tells not just Israel who's in charge here, but it also shows the neighboring countries who are oppressing the Israelites. Like, okay, it's not these people; they are insignificant, but their God is woof. We got to be careful. I also find it very fascinating because we just talked about Moab and the Amorites and the Amalekites here. So those are all people who are oppressing them on the
Their
Ehud
east
side,
side.
on their
Yeah.
east side. Philistine is on the west side. Can we say Gaza Strip? Would that be a terrible? Like, it looks like it's
That's where, that's where the Philistines
Yeah, they
were,
would be. They were sea people, so they were on the coast, like Gaza's on the coast. And this is just them kind of entering the story. They'll emerge later as one of Israel's biggest enemies. During the time of David and
Yep.
Saul. But yeah, we see them there. So they're surrounded on every side
Yep.
by these other people.
And then we didn't even talk about Mesopotamia with Othniel, but that came from the north.
Yeah.
So do you see the problem? They're hemmed in here, God's people. And God had said, if you follow me and you follow my commands, there is going to be great rest for you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless your children. But if you take up other gods and you assume and absorb the culture of the wicked people that I have already deemed as judged, I am going to judge you. And so now you're seeing they're hemmed in by all of these people from the north, from the west, and from the east. And yet the Lord is long-suffering. The Lord is providing them with deliverance by very unremarkable men, using very unremarkable weapons, all for the glory of God. And oh man, do you see why Judges is just so amazing? Wow, our time is just flying. It has flown, but we did cover everything. But can you give us a takeaway maybe that we can use today, right now, as Christians in the 21st century?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's important in the story of Judges is just that these people didn't do a good job of passing the faith from one generation to next. So they never stay faithful for more than one generation, two at the most. And they had been instructed in the Shema and Deuteronomy, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one, and you're to impress upon your children all these commands and things I've taught about you. Talk about them when you go along the road and when you get up, when you lie down, write them on the doorframes of your homes. And so they're supposed to be passing along the stories and testimonies and precepts of God from generation to generation, and they fail to do that. And if there's something we're probably struggling with in Western Christianity today is passing on that to the next generation, and that they would have an authentic experience of God's presence as well. And so we need to, if you're a follower of Jesus and you got kids at home or grandkids in your life, that's your responsibility, your biblical responsibility to teach them and to share about what God's done in your life and what he's done in the past and what we can anticipate he'll do in the future.
And for you who are single and you've been single your whole life, you still have a gift or this wonderful thing called hospitality.
Yeah.
Open your home. You might not even want be able you don't feel confident to teach or to lead, but you can invite somebody to come in and do so, and you could just open your home. You could be the person of peace who just allows that to happen. And what a wonderful gift that would be to your neighborhood, right? I mean, the idea is that we serve God and it's to his glory. Because and why do we do that? It's not for fire insurance. It's because look at what Christ has done. He's paid the penalty for our sins. What must you do to enjoy a relationship with Jesus forever and have eternal life? Is just simply this: believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved. He's done all the work, friend, all the work. And we get to enjoy being a part of his great commission, which just means that we go into all the world and we preach the good news and we make disciples of all nations. And it starts in your own backyard or even in your home.
Amen.
Okay, Price Chapel, how do we connect with you guys?
Yeah, Price Chapel, we have services on Sundays at 9:30 and 11. PriceChapel.org is our website. We're going through the book of 1 John right now, so we'd love to have you join us on a Sunday. We have lots of different programs for kids and youth throughout the week.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, Steve, thank you so much for coming all the way from Price into Provo Studios to lead us on this conversation. It's been so good and disgusting all at the same time. Dear friend, enjoy your day. Continue reading the book of Judges, friend. You're not going to be disappointed.